Today, Jonathan, we're going to talk about bubbles and the psychology of a market cycle. And I know that you yourself went through the ups and downs in the last Bitcoin market cycle where it went from a few $1,000s up to $20,000. It just seemed like a phenomenal event back in 2017, I believe.
Mhm.
So let's take a look at that market cycle. Way back in the day in 2016 or so, you were talking to me about Bitcoin. Can you remember what the price was back then?
Sure. In 2016, it was around, give or take, like $600, $700, something like that.
Wow, that is just really incredible when you think back to it.
Mm.
And I remember sitting in my office talking to you on a video call, and you were talking about Bitcoin, and I thought, yeah, maybe I'll put just a couple $1,000s into it, just as sort of a
Mm.
speculative thing, not expecting it necessarily to go anywhere. However, I remember sharing with you at that time, I did try to get on one of the exchanges and buy some Bitcoin. It was just like too difficult, and they weren't getting back to me. I think they had technical issues. And long story short, I did not open an account and did not buy any Bitcoin. And then from my point of view, as from a psychology point of view, as I watched it go up, each time it climbed up, when it went up to $5,000, let's say, or $8,000, I thought, oh gosh, it's crazily expensive right now. I would never buy it at this price. And then had to watch painfully as it went all the way up to $20,000. But then, as someone who didn't enter into the market, I think I wasn't alone. There was a lot of people who didn't enter in when it then fell back dramatically, who were just sort of like, I don't feel like I was doing this, but I was glad that I was not hadn't invested at the highs. But I think there was a lot of people who were like, yes, we told you so. Of
Mm.
course, this is a speculative
Yes.
investment, and people are losing their shirts. Uh,
Tulips. It's the tulip
yeah,
thing all over again.
it's the
Yes.
tulip thing. We heard that many times. So, what was your experience with this market cycle the first time you went through it in such a dramatic way?
So it was really an extraordinary journey to go from being sort of regular guy ish, like comfortable, doing fine financially, but not crushing or anything like that, to watching Bitcoin, which almost 30x in the year 2017. It started about $700, ended up around 20,000. Um, that was very powerful. I owned a fair amount of Bitcoin at that point, and my net worth really skyrocketed. And I went through a bunch of these stages that were, if we look at the psychology of the market cycle, where there's a point when it starts going up and it keeps going up, where you hit that, like, it goes from optimism and it really turns to belief, where not so much for me with the let's go all in. I didn't keep buying more and more. I mean, I bought a certain amount every month, no matter what, is what I was doing. So it's just DCAing in. But I started to believe, like, oh, this is a train that's never going to stop, essentially. Like, this is like up only at this point, give or take. Sure, there were going to be little down swings along the way, but basically, this is just a winning ticket I got here, and I can't go wrong at this point. And so it got really exciting. I hit the thrill part. I mean, again, I'm not a YOLO type of guy, but I did have at points the vast majority of my net worth in not just cryptocurrency, but in Bitcoin. And that ended up being difficult because while I hit the euphoria stage, the I am a genius, which I did kind of think, I'm like, look, I figured it out ahead of everyone else, or not everyone, but most of the world, and I'm profiting from it. Like, this is incredible. Like, to the victor go the spoils. Like, I figured it out. I spent money on it when I knew it was just a lottery ticket. I continued to buy as it started to gain value, and now here we are. Like, we've done it. We're never going back. We're all world champions, basically. And I thought, like, I'm good. Like, I solved my life. Um, and I hit my apex of net worth around February of 2018, and then the market turned, and things started going down. And the thing about Bitcoin is it has these big downswings. Even on its way up, it has big downswings. All the way through, it's going to have big downswings. Even in bull markets, you can look at this last one or any of the others. It's always like that, where it's going up, and suddenly it goes down 25% in 4 days, or it has a really bad month or something like that. That's very common for it. So it was a little hard to tell if we were actually going through hell, or if we were just going through one of these, like, oh, it's just another sort of rocky ride. And of course, it's going to come back. I kept thinking it was just going to come back. I didn't really have any sense of how it all worked. And I was really confused about it. And I had no interest in selling at any point at all. I was like, I'm like, this is going to come back, and there's no way I'm going to sell when I was worth so much more before. How could I sell now? And that was in some ways a regrettable choice because it didn't just drop from 20,000 down to 15 or 12, dropped all the way down to 3,500 at different points, and was for most of the next few years below 10,000. And so I was very aware of all the money that I no longer had, that my net worth was that much littler. And all I had to do was, like, if I could have hit the top, like, it was really hard. All of 2018 was really hard not to think like I could have, sold, some, or when we were at 18,000, 19,000, 20,000, and had all this money and be set now. And by the way, now that everything's amazingly cheap again, like Bitcoin dropped all the way to 3,500 or so. Ethereum dropped under $100 at one point, which I did buy some Ethereum up, but I would have had all this money to buy this stuff back up and still had a lot of cash left over. Like, I could have won in every possible direction. That's not what I did, though. I just held on and held on and held on. So I don't know if I think I did. I was in the denial phase for sure, of believing we can recover from this. When people see the true value, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I feel that now as well, as we are now in another bear market. I never panicked. I never went through that piece or anger. I just was in depression. And not the I'll never make it back, but I didn't know if it ever could come back. And so for me, it was more of a sense of well, I've ridden this thing out. I got in because of particular reasons. The world did see value before, and I believe it's possible they will see it again. And so I'm just riding this train, and if it goes to nothing, it goes to nothing. But if it ends up becoming a thing, I think it still could. This is me talking to myself in 2018, 2019. I want to be there for it. I don't want to be the guy who didn't sell at 20,000, but sold at 3,000 and did okay, and then missed out on all the generational wealth, which was ahead of me if I just held on. I don't want to be that guy. I have no interest. I'm much more interested in being the guy who goes to zero with this stuff than being the guy who misses out on the generational wealth. Because if I go to zero, I got more shots at the apple. I've got many, many years of my life left. I can do this again. I have other assets. I don't go completely broke if all my crypto goes to zero anyway. I'm fine. I'm not as well. It hurts a lot, but I'm okay. But giving up the generational wealth piece for me anyway is what am I how can you do that? That feels like an insane miscalculation. One of the things that, I see all the time, not just with Bitcoin, but Bitcoin a lot, where they do articles like, if you had bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin in 2014, this is how much it would be worth right now. And they love writing that article with that title, or video with that title. They also do it with Amazon sometimes, they pick a year, or Apple. One thing that they always leave out is, you have to have never sold it at any point, So you have to ride the train all the way through to get to the place where now it's an unbelievable gainer, right? But everyone is always telling you to sell. Everyone around you always is saying, oh God, you should sell some. And I understand why they say it. And they're often correct if in a short-term point of view, and maybe even from the long term, they're often correct. But if you're the guy who got in on Amazon when it was cheap, there was some very rocky roads for Amazon. Amazon was down 95% at one point. In the early days. But if you just held on, it's not easy to be that person, but if you just held on, you are now certainly wealthy if you had any reasonable amount of Amazon at all, right? And that's true for many companies that ended up making it big and being world-changing companies. Apple, we could do this all day, right? Microsoft, even Tesla. Bitcoin is the same thing. And there are some people who got in very, very cheaply, much cheaper than I did. I got in at 300, 400, 250. People got in at $1 and less than $1 and things like that. The first Bitcoin transaction was 2 pizzas were sold for 10,000 Bitcoin, God. Which right now is, I think, $190 million. That was the first Bitcoin transaction. And that was not considered weird. That was $20 worth of pizza, in 2009,
wow,
2010, whatever it was. Yeah. So, some people are generationally wealthy and more because of this already. And sure, they should sell some probably. They should lock up some of that generational wealth. And you can make cases all along the way. But I feel like this market cycle, where we are doing the same kind of big euphoric upswing and then a massive downswing, I see people around me being panicked, depressed, full of anxiety, all the different things. I'm not on this train anymore. I felt some of the euphoria when we went up for sure, but I don't feel all these negative emotions as we go down because I've already been on this train, and I'm sort of decided last cycle that I'm on this train for real. I'm not getting off. Maybe there'll be points when I sell off little bits because I need the money or because I want to buy something, big for myself or whatever, or trade it for something else. Fine. But my plan is not to bail. I don't have an exit strategy with Bitcoin right now. My exit strategy is Bitcoin becomes as relevant as I think it will, and I don't need an exit strategy. It's like in the Matrix when Neo's like, "Do you mean I'll be faster than bullets and I can dodge them?" And he says, "No, Neo. I mean, when you get there, you won't need to dodge bullets. Like you don't have to dodge anything. I don't need to sell my Bitcoin for fiat currency. The Bitcoin is enough, and everyone in the world respects that and will trade anything for it. Like that's the future I see eventually. I absolutely can be wrong about this, and I'm willing to be wrong. But every time I'm right, I'm generationally wealthy. Every time I'm wrong, I got to start over, and that's okay with me. Like I'm willing to be that guy who doesn't take the solid win because I'm trying to win multiple championships here, instead of like getting the playoffs a few times, which is it's a philosophy, and not everyone has to abide by it. Everyone can have their own investing philosophy. That's always been mine. It's done very well for me, and I expect it to continue. Hopefully, in this case, because I'm really leveraged to have this work out well if things go well in the long haul. So for me, the psychology of the market cycle is no longer a big piece, but I see it all around me all the time, even now, even with people who are old hat at it, who've been around a long time and have gone through this before. I see a lot of them really struggling with this too.
So looking at the market now and looking at those other people who you do see struggling at it, and perhaps comparing that, overlaying it to what happened in 2017, just from a market psychology point of view, there's macro things we don't know what's going to happen, but from a market psychology point of view, where do you see the crypto market being currently?
Oh, I think we're somewhere in like anxiety to panic, somewhere in that general area. I don't believe we've actually hit the stone bottom of the crypto market yet. This cycle, I hope I'm wrong. Although I kind of hope I'm right too, because I want to buy stuff cheaper. So that, but if I don't get the opportunity, I'm got enough crypto that's fine. Like, please go up. That would be great. But I actually think like just the world macro situation is going to drag everything down further most of the time anyway. And so as a result, I see people in different stages of that, and the people who've been around for multiple times, like I saw experiencing these emotions at times, but less so than the new people who are experiencing it for the first time. Who I see, like I have a friend who is depressed, like legit depressed, and like recently talked to me about the idea of like, they sort of understand people who might want to end it all because, I was like, is this just a financial thing? And they're like, yes.
Wow.
And to me, I was like, I mean, it's okay to go broke. It's like, you don't have to end it. Like, there's no, so like, it's okay. Like, don't be afraid of going broke. That's where I come from. Also, like, I know for me, it's shocking because I just never think that way. I just think like, oh, okay, new problem to solve. So that's part of maybe why the psychology piece isn't so powerful for me. I'm not afraid of it all going badly. I know I will not be thrilled with it. I'm sure I'll be unhappy and sad for a while if I go super broke because everything goes to zero. That would not be great. But I don't believe I would go into a big tailspin at all. I think it would be a rough week or month or something like that. And then I would like pick myself back up and be like, all right, what's next? And that's sort of how I've always done it. And I've had multiple points in my life, even in the last 15 years, where I've sort of said, last 20 years, I guess. Two times I can think of in the last 20 years where I was like, I'm kind of out of money and don't really have any great prospects to get some. What am I going to do about this? And I just sit down and figure something out. And both times I did, and both times it worked out. And eventually I had enough money to start investing, and here we are, and now like we're riding this train, baby. And, but I'm willing to like start essentially new, and I'm not afraid of that. I feel like I can do it. And it'll be fine. I may not live as comfortably. I may have like, more things to be concerned about in terms of financially in the future than I do right now. I don't think it's going to go that way. Anyway, I think it's all going to work out great most of the time. But not being afraid of going broke helps. I'm not saying like you should, YOLO your way on the roulette wheel forever. You're obviously going to go broke that way. But having like such a fear of it that like you actually understand why people commit suicide, I think is problematic. It means you're probably too deep in the market. Like, you probably should not be in such speculative investments if you can't emotionally handle it. And I don't say that like paternalistically or patronizing, I guess is what I mean. I don't mean to be patronizing. Just I see like so many people around me struggle with this, like even in the bull market, and we would have these, 3-week downturns. People would freak out. The amount of phone calls I would get from friends who were in the market for the first time and doing amazingly well, but would freak out and, need to be sort of talked off the ledge, not like they were going to kill themselves, but like they wanted a panic sell essentially. And I'd be like, they bought Bitcoin for 10,000. It is still at $35,000. That is a great win. And if you want to take your profit, that's totally fine. But likely with the way the market cycles have gone in the past and the way we're going right now, it's very likely it's going to keep going up and we're probably not at the top or anywhere close to it. And that, usually was true when I said that. I don't know if it was always true, but it was almost always true. So I see it around me still. And it makes me sort of reconsider if I should even recommend people buying these assets as much as I have in the past, because there is an emotional hardiness that you kind of need, or you need to be able to not think about it and not look at it. That's the other way to do it, right? If you can just keep it like just not know what the price is every few months, you're fine. And I have a friend who is exactly like that. Bought a bunch of Ethereum, never looks at the price, and it's easy for her.
Yeah.
But most people I know look at the price every day, even multiple times a day. And I think for most of them, that's tough.